Woman was God's second mistake. When Nietzsche wrote that line, it wasn't just to provoke, it was to challenge, to stab at the soft underbelly of our assumptions. But if Nietzsche lit the match, it was Arthur Schopenhauer who drenched the woodpile in gasoline. Long before Nietzsche dared to question the divine order, Schopenhauer had already drawn up the blueprints for this unsettling thought. And what was his vision? A world where beauty is a trap, love is a lie, and women are nature's most dangerous weapon. Welcome to the inner mirror. This isn't going to be pleasant. Schopenhauer's views on women are harsh. No way around that. Many have called them hateful. And maybe they are. But if we stop at name-calling, we miss the point. Philosophy isn't about comfort. It's about truth. Even when that truth is dressed in the rags of a bitter old man. So today, we're not here to defend Schopenhauer. We're here to understand him. Not to agree, but to see what he saw. Because sometimes the ugliest paintings still show us something real. To begin, we need to step back and ask the bigger question. What kind of world did Schopenhauer believe we were living in? The answer? One ruled not by reason, not by God, but by a force far more primitive. He called it the will to live. And unlike Freud, who later tied our instincts to pleasure and repression, Schopenhauer's will was blind. It didn't care about happiness. It didn't care about justice. It simply wanted to persist, to survive, to replicate. Everything in life, he believed, is just a mask hiding that deeper, darker urge. From trees spreading seeds to men building empires, it's all just the will wearing different costumes. Even our thoughts, our dreams, and our passions are tools used by the will to keep the cycle going. Freedom, illusion. Choice, a beautifully staged lie. We're not independent thinkers. We're puppets. And the hand pulling the strings? That ancient, insatiable urge to live at all costs. So when Schopenhauer turned his eye toward women, he wasn't starting from a place of cultural critique. He was starting from metaphysics, from biology, from the raw mechanics of life. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. In his view, men and women weren't equals in different bodies. They were tools with separate jobs. The will, he believed, designed them differently for one purpose: the survival of the species. What is the man? A potential rebel. Someone who, in rare moments, could defy his programming. He could choose pain, sacrifice, or transcendence over comfort. He could die for ideals. He could chase beauty with no reward. He could walk away from nature and say, "Number, I choose something else." What is it about the woman? She was the will perfected. To Schopenhauer, a woman wasn't an error. She was the masterpiece of the biological machine. Her instincts, her emotions, and her behaviors were all finely tuned to protect, nurture, and extend life. Not her own life necessarily, but the life of the species. She was the vessel of continuity, the caretaker of children, and the manager of survival. This is where that brutal line begins to make sense. Woman was God's second mistake. The first, perhaps, was giving man the illusion of freedom. The second was giving him someone who could take it all away. When Schopenhauer describes women as lacking reason or being overly emotional, it's not just misogyny. It's his metaphysics in action. He believed reason was a tool for escaping the will. Logic, sacrifice, and discipline were man's tools for transcendence. But woman, in her essence, was not meant to transcend. She was meant to preserve, to protect, to reproduce. It's not that she's irrational, it's that she's grounded. She lives in the now. Her mind, by nature, is focused on the immediate needs of life, security, food, children, and stability. And in Schopenhauer's worldview, that makes her dangerously effective. Because while the man chases the truth, the woman ensures that life goes on. But here's where it gets even more complicated. If a woman is the perfect agent of the will, then love, especially romantic love, is its most powerful trick. In the Metaphysics of Sexual Love, Schopenhauer tears the veil off of passion. That soul-aching longing, that once-in-a-lifetime connection, that desperate hunger that makes men cross oceans and start wars. All of it, he says, is biology wearing lipstick. The will doesn't speak through logic. It speaks through chemistry, through attraction, through obsession. You think you're falling in love, but you're falling into a program. You're being chosen not as an individual, but as a reproductive candidate. The traits you're drawn to, they're not about beauty. They're about fertility, stability, genetic success. When a man falls for a woman, Schopenhauer says, he's not choosing her. The species is choosing through him. And once reproduction happens, the spell breaks. That burning passion, gone. They will get what they want. Now it moves on. If that sounds cynical, it's because it is. But it also explains something many people feel and never say aloud. The way desire can vanish after sex. The way relationships change after children. The way love shifts from fire to function. Schopenhauer saw this not as failure, but as design. And that leads him to one of his most controversial claims, that women, even if unconsciously, understand their power over men lies in their ability to provoke desire. To him, feminine charm isn't a weakness, it's a weapon. Flirtation, vulnerability, and warmth aren't just social skills, they're survival tactics, ways of attracting a provider, locking down support, and ensuring continuity. A man thinks he's choosing his partner, but according to Schopenhauer, he's being chosen. Seduced not by personality, but by the will disguised in a beautiful face. That's why he believed women didn't pursue lofty ideals or abstract truths. They didn't need to. Their mission was life. The moment. The nest. The man may build cathedrals to honor heaven, but the woman builds the home that raises the next generation. The contrast couldn't be clearer in Schopenhauer's eyes. And yet, beneath all of this theory, beneath the sweeping metaphysics and sharp essays, there's something deeply personal, a pain that philosophy couldn't quite hide. Because when Schopenhauer wrote about women, he wasn't just writing as a thinker, he was writing as a wounded son. His mother, Johanna Schopenhauer, was brilliant, successful and respected, a novelist, a social force. But to Arthur, she was cold, unreachable, dismissive. Their letters were filled with contempt. And while she saw him as arrogant and joyless, he saw her as vain and manipulative. In many ways, the battlefield of Schopenhauer's philosophy was the battlefield of his childhood. His theory wasn't born in a vacuum. It was born in a broken relationship, one where love was withheld, one where vulnerability became mistrust. So when he writes about the deceptive nature of femininity, we have to ask, is he diagnosing humanity, or is he still trying to understand his mother? We'll explore that more later in the video. But for now, sit back and think about this. Schopenhauer wasn't just criticizing women, he was afraid of them. Because to him, they weren't just human, they were nature itself. And nature, in his world, was not your friend. If you've been listening closely all this time, you'll remember something that slipped between the lines. A truth that's more emotional than intellectual. Schopenhauer wasn't just criticizing women. He was terrified of them, but not in the way most people think. This fear wasn't about confrontation, rejection, or even dominance. It was something deeper, something older. He saw women as the most efficient expression of the one thing he hated most, life itself. Let's go back. Schopenhauer didn't believe life was a blessing. He didn't think existence was some cosmic gift wrapped in joy and wonder. For him, life was suffering, a treadmill of craving, disappointment, and brief hollow victories. We desire, we chase, we get, then we start again. A pendulum, he said, swinging between pain and boredom. And what keeps that pendulum in motion? The will to live, that blind, primal force that just wants more life, more bodies, more generations, more struggle. And who, in Schopenhauer's worldview, is the perfect agent of that will? Woman. Not because she's evil, not because she's manipulative, but because everything about her is optimized for life's continuation. Let's break that down. Men, Schopenhauer said, are capable of defying the will. Not easily, but it's possible. Through renunciation, sacrifice, discipline, or creativity, a man can, in theory, say no. He can walk away from desire, from comfort, from reproduction. He can channel his energy into something transcendent, a symphony, a philosophy, a monastery, a war for something bigger than himself. But a woman? She doesn't defy the will. She is the will. And this, Schopenhauer believed, is why men become irrational in her presence. Why can the most disciplined monk, the most principled philosopher, and the most visionary artist crumble with a glance, a touch, or a smile. Not because he's weak, because she is nature incarnate. The curve of her waist, the softness of her voice, the scent of her hair, all of it is evolutionary theater. It's biology putting on a play. And every man in the audience knows his lines by heart, even if he's never rehearsed them. He thinks he's falling in love, but it's the will calling him back to the cycle. To Schopenhauer, this wasn't just sad, it was horrifying, because it meant that even the highest man, the man who touched truth and beauty, could be dragged back into the mud by the illusion of love. Let's make that real. Think of the man who spent years building something, a vision, a craft, a business, a path that defines him. Then she arrives. She's enchanting. Everything about her feels like destiny. He thinks, this is it. This is what I was missing. He starts changing. A few skipped gym sessions. A few canceled nights with the guys. Some goals were postponed. Some dreams softened. He's still working, but he's not burning. He's orbiting now, not leading. Soon his center shifts. His mission fades. She becomes the new mission, not because she's cruel, not because she planned it, but because the energy that drew her to him, his fire, his focus, his refusal to be swayed, is gone. He becomes a man she didn't choose, because he stopped choosing himself. And Schopenhauer would say, that was the will all along. It dressed itself as love. It dangled intimacy, affection, and beauty in front of him. And the moment he stepped off his path, the illusion unraveled. This is why Schopenhauer didn't trust romance. Not because he hated connection, but because he believed most love stories are written by the species, not the soul. In his essay, The Metaphysics of Sexual Love, he argues that the entire concept of falling in love is a strategy. Not a conscious one, but an evolutionary one. Men are drawn to fertility, youth, health, and beauty. Women are drawn to security, status, strength, and competence. These desires aren't chosen. They're coded. And when they align just right, we call it chemistry. We write poems about it. We get married. We have children. But what if all of that, every heartbeat, every kiss, every whispered promise, is just the will writing another chapter in its endless book? That's Schopenhauer's claim. Love isn't destiny. It's deployment. You're not a romantic. You're a soldier in life's war to continue itself. Harsh? Yes. But is it untrue? Let's be honest. Haven't you felt it? That moment when the spell breaks. When the love that once felt eternal becomes a negotiation. When passion becomes routine. When you realize, this wasn't what you thought. Schopenhauer saw that moment not as failure, but as revelation. You weren't in love. You were under command. And now, the mission is complete. They will get what they want, genes passed on, and stability secured. And if you're lucky, you find peace in that. If not, you wake up with a partner who no longer inspires you, and a life that feels smaller than the one you left behind. That's the trap. That's the beautiful prison. And this is why Schopenhauer feared women. Not as individuals, but as instruments. He saw in them not malice, but power. Not manipulation, but inevitability. They were the will's most elegant creation, the bait that no man could resist, the test most men would fail. And that test doesn't stop at love. It echoes into every part of life. You think you're pursuing freedom, but are you? You think you're making choices, but whose choices are they? This is where Schopenhauer's voice gets eerily modern. Because look around. This tension he wrote about in the 1800s, it's everywhere today. Men lose themselves in relationships. Ambition fades. Purpose dissolves. And suddenly, the world feels heavy. The mission becomes unclear. Not because she asked for it, but because he forgot who he was before she arrived. Schopenhauer's warning wasn't, don't love women. It was, don't forget your mission. And if you do love, do it with awareness. Not because you're lonely, not because your hormones are screaming, not because you need her validation, but because you chose it. From strength, from fullness. Because when a man loves from fullness, he invites her into his world. He doesn't abandon his world for hers. She becomes a partner, not a purpose. A companion, not a compass. And that, Schopenhauer would say, is the only way a man escapes the will, not by denying love, but by mastering the force behind it. Now that we've peeled back Schopenhauer's worldview, his metaphysics, his fear of desire, and his brutal view of romantic love, it's time to ask something personal. Where did all this come from? Because no philosophy, no matter how sharp or abstract, is born in a vacuum. It grows out of experience. It rises from heartbreak, rejection, childhood, and memory. And for Schopenhauer, the most powerful influence, the ghost that haunts every page of his writing on women, was not a lover. It was his mother. Johanna Schopenhauer wasn't just anyone. She was brilliant, famous in her own right, a novelist, a literary hostess, a woman who moved in the highest circles of Weimar intellectual society. Her home was a salon of thinkers and artists, Goethe among them. She had taste, charm, charisma, independence. But to Arthur, she was cold, dismissive, distant. Where he craved connection, she offered performance. Where he longed for nurturing, she gave critique. In his eyes, she was vain and self-absorbed. In hers, he was dramatic, gloomy, and insufferable. Their letters, surviving today, are emotionally charged battlegrounds of blame, sarcasm, and unmet needs. Arthur believed she didn't love him. Johanna, perhaps, believed he demanded too much. But one thing is clear. Their relationship was toxic. And out of that emotional trench warfare came a deep wound. One that bled into everything he later wrote about women. Because when he said that women were vain, emotional, incapable of objectivity, he wasn't just describing the female nature. He was describing his mother. This is what makes Schopenhauer's philosophy so difficult and so human. His theory is not just intellectual bitterness. It's personal pain given structure. A child's longing turned into metaphysics. A rejection woven into universal law. And yet, he still managed to universalize that pain. He used philosophy to escape the chaos of emotion, to turn what felt like a private wound into a public warning. That warning? Don't trust beauty. Don't trust desire. Don't trust the feeling that says, this time it's real. Because that voice, he believed, belongs not to you, but to the will. And the will wants one thing only: your surrender. This brings us to the final, chilling insight in Schopenhauer's work. One that hits like a cold splash of water. He didn't just believe women were agents of the will. He believed they were its strongest agents, not through strength or intellect, but through seduction. A man can build a wall of logic, a fortress of discipline, a temple of spiritual ideals, and one look, one kiss, one moment of softness, it all comes crashing down. Why? Because beauty bypasses reason. Because the promise of intimacy, of closeness, of feminine warmth, doesn't knock on the front door of your mind. It sneaks through the basement window. It disarms you before you know what's happening. And once you've stepped into that gravity, it's almost impossible to find your way back out. That's the fear. Schopenhauer believed women held a kind of unconscious power, a seductive magnetism that even the strongest men could not resist, not because of any malice, but because nature made them that way. Their power wasn't in confrontation. It was in suggestion, in vulnerability, in silence. He describes it as a kind of hypnosis, a quiet rerouting of the male compass. Suddenly, he's not climbing mountains or building empires. He's chasing smiles, seeking approval, trading his mission for her affection. And here lies Schopenhauer's final warning: not to fear women as people, but to understand the ancient force behind them, the same force that lives in you, the will. Because no matter how much you meditate, how many books you read, or how many rules you live by, that will is still there, deep in your bones, in your cravings, in your hunger for love, connection, beauty, sex, intimacy, family. It's not wrong. It's not evil. It just is. And if you don't become conscious of it, it will drive your life. That's what Schopenhauer feared most. Not women, but the man who forgets himself in pursuit of one. So what do we do with all this? Do we become cold, detached, bitter? Number. That's not what Schopenhauer wanted. Even in his darkest writings, there's a hidden invitation. Don't surrender blindly. Don't mistake emotion for truth. Don't lose your center chasing an illusion. Instead, know yourself. Know your desires, your weaknesses, and your instincts. Name them, face them, and from that self-awareness, choose consciously. If you love, love from a place of strength, not need. Build your purpose before you share it. Make your mission the center of your life, not someone else. When a man lives from fullness, he can welcome love without becoming consumed by it. He doesn't orbit her. He invites her to walk beside him, and she respects him more for it. Because deep down, most women don't want to be your son. They want to join you on the path to something brighter. Schopenhauer's philosophy is bitter medicine, but sometimes bitter medicine cures the deepest disease, self-abandonment. And that's the real message he left behind. Not hate women, but master yourself. Not fear beauty, but understand your attraction. Not run from love, but don't let love make you forget who you are. Because the man who keeps his center, who knows his values, his direction, and his mission, can love fiercely and freely. He doesn't become a prisoner of desire. He becomes a master of it. And in a world full of distraction, temptation, and beautiful traps, that kind of man is rare. That kind of man is dangerous. So if there's one thing to take from Schopenhauer's shadowy wisdom, it's this: know the will, respect it, but never let it drive the ship. Because you were not born to be a passenger in your own life. You were born to steer. Now tell me, have you ever lost yourself in love? Have you ever traded your mission for desire? Drop your story in the comments, if you dare. And remember, this isn't about fear. It's about freedom. Until next time, hold your center.